Hello, yes, it's me, and in honor of Lightyear coming out, I'm going to talk about Toy Story 4. So there's a few reasons I've heard. That people don't love or straight up despise Toy Story 4. Like, the vitriol against this movie. Either you feel it's unnecessary, so even if you don't mind it, it's something that maybe feels like a cash grab or doesn't need to be here, or you believe that it completely undoes, absolutely destroys the ending of Toy Story 3, just stomps on its grave, burns it to the ground. I'm telling you, people are really heated. I get it. I've gotten heated over fiction before. But that just was never me. I think I cried like 5 times during Toy Story 4. And you can only depend on me to cry like 2 times with the totality of the other movies. And that's mostly in 3, I'll admit, which is the incinerator scene when they all hold hands. And yeah, the ending makes me tear up often. It's a nice closer to Woody and Andy's story. But it's just not the end of Woody's story to me. But like Toy Story 4, like the opening scene, oh my gosh, I can't even. Yes, obviously the goodbye scene. And within that scene, also the hug between him and Buzz. And then also giving the sheriff badge to Jesse. Oh my god. Then also, I always cry in the moment when Gabby finds her little girl. Underrated emotional moment. We'll get to why. And I've also heard of a lot of people who do like 4, and a lot of them maybe weren't like so absolutely insanely attached to the ending of 3. So I'm wondering if maybe there's something to do with not adoring the ending of 3 and loving this, as opposed to loving the ending of 3 and absolutely despising this. Because I can understand the frustration, I suppose, of having a moment between Andy and Bonnie of like passing on this childhood toy that's been with him forever, and then him sitting in her closet. But that brings us to the number one reason why I think Toy Story 4 brings so much interesting nuance to the discussion of the relationship between toys and kids. I feel like Toy Story 4, at least somewhat, treats kids like more complex humans than the others did. And to preface all of this, I love the other 3 movies. I just wouldn't say I'm like a ride or die Toy Story fan. Like, Toy Story is not my Pixar franchise. My Pixar franchise is Finding Nemo, okay? And then Ratatouille and WALL-E are like up there, but like I hugely respect what they did, and I love so many moments from them, but they always stuck to the conversation of give a kid a toy, they love it, toy loves them, right? Like in Toy Story 2, Woody never considers the possibility that Jesse, a toy who's very anxious about being loved again, he never considers the possibility that Andy won't be that into her as a toy and will maybe put her on a shelf and leave her, and then she'll be just as upset. That makes me sound really callous. Like, obviously it worked out, and like I get it. I'm not trying to pull apart this movie years later for the sake of pulling it apart. Woody does know Andy very well. Jessie is a cow doll. Because I would say like cowboy doll, but she's cowgirl. She's a westernish doll. he is a westernish doll, so like it stands to reason that everything would work out, and it does. It's just I never realized how emotionally effective that was, the exploration of children as tiny humans, until I saw it in Toy Story 4, and Gabby puts this little girl Harmony on a pedestal and believes that, oh, if only I could have all my pieces, if only my brother's coughing, I'm sorry. If only I had all my pieces, if only I were whole and had all my extrinsic value intact, then this little girl would love me, and like it would just happen. It would just happen. Like, I just appreciate the fact that Toy Story 4 acknowledges reality, which is that love isn't something that just happens. It's something that you choose for specific reasons, and the little girl who Gabby ended up with chose her because she needed someone in that moment. And I think that was another really, really interesting thing to bring to the conversation of toys and humans, because 1 through 3 really dug into the idea that toys are a conduit for imagination, which I think is perfect. I completely understand that. Toys were always a huge way for me to be a storyteller as a kid, so I completely understand that. And Toy Story 4 extends that conversation and says toys are also a huge source of comfort for children. Bonnie feels lost and lonely and scared on her first day of kindergarten, and she makes herself a friend because she needs one. A little girl can't find her parents, and she finds someone to hold on to and talk to, which gives her the courage to find help. In addition to treating kids like whole complex humans, I think Toy Story 4 also does a really good job of treating toys like real complex humans. Throughout the first trilogy, we see a lot of immense loyalty to humans from toys, and toys basically hold senses of value being tied up in whether or not they're played with, which I understand. Again, I'm not trying to knock down anything retroactively, because you can absolutely connect that to real life, like we are our relationships to people. But sometimes a certain relationship in our lives can have been so influential to us that we can't really move on, and therefore need to evolve. We need to find new purpose. I think this movie does such a good job at giving Woody a new purpose. In his conversations with Forky, we see how he is not over Andy, and we don't know if he ever will be, and I think that really makes you think about how long Woody must have been in this family. We know that he's been with Andy since 1, where he looks to be around, I don't know, 8-ish, maybe inching towards like 10 or 11. You know, in 2, Andy's mom says he's not for sale, Woody's not for sale because he's an old family toy, so I think it's very possible that Woody, being a vintage toy, could have been in this family forever, and with Andy since he was born. Like, that's not nothing. I know that toys are basically immortal. They'd have to be completely incinerated to actually die, but a large chunk of Woody's life has been occupied in raising this child. And I think it's okay to say, sometimes you can't have that again, you know? You got a really good kid, and you can't replicate that, so maybe you can help other people find their kid. You can read into this multiple ways. You can see it as like grieving. It reminds me sort of what Avengers Endgame did, actually, in that you have 5 years of half of the universe being gone, and the point that we're supposed to take away by the end of the movie is that people didn't get over that. Like, Thanos assumed that things would just move on, and the Earth moved on, you know, whales in the Hudson or whatever, but people didn't. Even 5 years later, the Avengers still do everything they can to bring those people back, which is why I will always be mad at people who get pissed off about Steve's ending, because like that's the whole point, is he never moved on from the 40s, he never moved on from Peggy, just like people don't move on. And sometimes you shouldn't. Woody is grieving his relationship with Andy, and he's grieving Andy's childhood because he's all grown up now. And sometimes the direction of grief does not need to be, okay, move on to another kid, you know, have another one, like get another best friend, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's find a job that is just as fulfilling, or find a purpose that is just as fulfilling, but isn't the exact same. Because grief's changed you, you're different, that's okay. So instead of staying with Bonnie, Woody becomes, I guess within the metaphor, he could be like a psychologist or a social worker. And I'm sorry, it's sad that he has to leave his friends, but I just find it so much more interesting than he learns to move on to a different kid. He moves on to helping other people find their kids. Which is why I think it's so appropriate that they brought Bo Peep back. Like, she is his past. She's a sign of his past coming back to haunt him after his grieving process. She's changed too, and they're able to find each other and come back together as changed people. Like, that just hits me hard. I'm sorry. Like, harder than anything any of the others do. Except for maybe Buzz realizing he can't fly in the first one. That's pretty peak cinema. I think another real world phenomenon you could equate it to is just retirement, which reminds me of what Cars 3 did, somewhat more simplistically and more regarding like athletics and sports, but still like the same idea of I am incapable for whatever reason, psychological or physical, of doing this thing that I've loved doing all my life, and so I can at least do that for other people. I can help other people find that. And that brings me to Bo Peep, who I love and adore. Also, Giggle McDimples. I love all the new characters, obviously. Everyone. Kaboom, amazing. That's what annoys me the most, when people say Toy Story 4 is completely unnecessary and shouldn't have existed. Because I'm like, literally, you're ignoring the existence of my girl, Bo? Because it's not that she was badly written or a complete garbage character in the first two movies, really. Obviously, like, you know, she was a minor character. She got a few fun moments. But this movie just makes me like her so much more. It makes me see her as a real complex human. Again, I know a lot of people might hear that and go, oh, you just wanted a girl boss. Maybe.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
I'm not calling any writers of the originals sexist. Like, they wanted to tell a story about two dudes and a friendship, and that's amazing. It's a great one. But if I want to see better written female characters and more of them in cinema, I have to have high standards. I just do. Toy Story 1 and 2, Bo Peep doesn't meet those standards. Just like the girlfriend of the main dude is so often fairly flat and basic in movies, and that's kind of the case in the first two movies. I'm sorry, Toy Story stands. Again, it's not like a huge deal. Watching her be a bitter badass with like a history and wants and desires in this movie made me look back at the others and go, oh. So I settled. Oh. Why do we write her off with just a line in Toy Story 3? Like, the one really to blame is just the arbitrary conventions of film, and the arbitrary conventions of film say that the main dude has to have a girlfriend, you know? And so to say that, like, the girlfriend of the main character, you know, one of the main crew until 3, actually getting, like, more time dedicated to her, and what happened to her when she just disappeared, calling that unnecessary? Like, really? So yeah, sometimes when a movie does certain things better, I'm not saying everything, but does certain things better, than its predecessors. It can actually end up pointing out flaws in the original, which is fine. Like, you can live with flaws. You can still love something that has flaws. Believe it or not. I know the internet doesn't want to do that, but there's interesting to know. That's all. I think the one and only criticism for Toy Story 4 for me is that I understand Buzz's B plot is a little simplistic. Like, I can see why they went there, because he has like an existential crisis related to him being a toy in every movie. Like, he fights himself, he gets put on Spanish mode, he thinks that he's an actual space ranger, you know. So now they're like, oh, he listens to his buttons, you know. But it does make him come off as a little dumb. We've seen him make decisions. We know that he doesn't need this. And also, I feel like it's been years since he's been opened. I feel like he would have, if he would have had this crisis, he would have had it earlier. But it's not that big a deal, because it does serve as a demonstration that Buzz is good at leading and strategizing and helping his friends when he's not thinking about it. And it does demonstrate him as, you know, he's like the straight literal guy. So yeah, Toy Story 4 is completely my favorite. It feels like it is the natural next step in the conversation. 1 was about a child can love more than one toy. 2 is a child's love is enough, even if you're not always being played with, you can still be there for them. 3 is being there for them meant something. Even if you have to leave them now, you can say goodbye and acknowledge your influence on their life. And 4 is sometimes your role isn't being there for a kid, or isn't being there for a kid forever. Sometimes it's being there for other toys. And also, I think it makes a cute rom-com, so sue me. So I don't know, maybe it's just that Toy Story 3 didn't hit insanely hard to me. As you can see, I was not a person who gave up my toys and who saw them as something that would only ever be a part of my childhood. I think very often people think that they have to do that because it's what you do it as an adult, but I think adults are what they want to be. And if Toy Story 4 and the other movies have taught us anything, it's that there's room for all of those stories. The stories of someone who is there for a kid throughout their entire life and they are the favorite, as well as the toys who are there for a little bit to help their kid get used to sleeping in the dark, and then it's time to move on. I just really appreciate that we got to see the evolution of that conversation. That's all.